Hello, good morning to all of you. Guys, I am Sumit from Govardhan Institute, and we are providing the online or offline software training for the subject C, C++, Java, Android, PHP, Oracle, Android, and iOS. And if for the training purposes, you can contact on either using on my email ID or on this WhatsApp number. You can also contact. So in today's lecture, I want to just introduce about the Spring framework. What is Spring framework? So let's we start the study about the Spring framework by the definition of the Spring framework. What is the Spring framework? What is the meaning of the Spring framework? So let we start from the simple definition of the Spring framework. Spring is nothing but a Spring is nothing but a Spring is nothing but a Java application framework. Spring is a Java application framework develop which is used to develop various Java based applications. What is Spring? Spring is a Java based application framework which is used to develop various Java based application. This is the simple definition of the Spring framework. But let we go for some elaborated definition of the otherwise the perfect technical definition of Spring. Spring is a Spring is a open source lightweight Spring is a open source lightweight expect aspect oriented dependency dependency injection based dependency injection based Java application framework used to develop used to develop Java based applications What is Spring? Spring is nothing but a open source lightweight aspect oriented dependency injection based Java application framework which is used to develop the Java based application. So here some technical terminologies are there. In the definition of the Spring, some technical terminologies are there. So let we examine each and every terminology in detail. Now the first terminology is open source. I know all of you having the idea about the open source. All of you have the idea about the open source. What is open source? Open source means when the software comes with the source file. When the software comes with the source file, that is known as open source. The same thing is here. Spring software. Spring software comes with the Java files, means the source files. That means so that we can say that it is a open source. And some another softwares which are also open source is nothing but an Hibernate, or we can say that Java itself it is an open source software. What is the meaning of open source? That software comes with the source file, that is known as the open source. Now the next terminology is lightweight. What is the meaning of lightweight software? So in the multiple ways we can say that Spring is a lightweight software. So let me examine each and everything in detail. The first thing is to execute the Spring code. We do not require heavyweight application or web servers. We do not require to execute the Spring code. We do not require any heavyweight softwares. We do not require, or we do not require or we do not require or we do not require any heavyweight any heavyweight containers. We do not require like EJB containers. We do not require. Okay, so that we can say that Spring is a lightweight. So how to execute the Spring code, and which softwares required to execute the Spring code? So to execute the Spring code, we require just a moment, guys. Here some the spelling mistake is there. To execute the Spring code, we required lightweight Spring containers. We required lightweight Spring containers, and these are nothing but in bin factory container, and the another one is application content container. These are nothing but a lightweight Spring containers. Why it is known as lightweight Spring container? Because to activate at anywhere, we can activate this anywhere we can activate the above containers. And the another thing is to activate the above containers, we have to just declare we have to just create an object of we have to just create an object of them. That's it, so that we can say that Spring is a lightweight. Why we have to say that Spring is a lightweight? There are multiple ways. In the multiple ways, we can prove that Spring is a lightweight. The first thing is, we do not require any heavyweight application servers or web servers, or we do not require any heavyweight containers to run the Spring code. What we required? We required a very lightweight Spring containers. We required, and these are nothing but an bin factory container, or or application application content container we required. And these are nothing but a lightweight. How to say this one is a lightweight container? Because to activate this one, we have to just create an object of this containers, and sorry, and we can activate anywhere we can activate this container. Now the second thing is while developing, otherwise to develop the Spring, to develop the Spring code we do not require any special classes or interfaces. We do not require. We can use normal ordinary classes. We can use normal ordinary classes. We can use ordinary classes, or you can use ordinary interfaces. We can use to develop the Spring code. We can use ordinary classes or interfaces. We can use ordinary classes means ordinary classes means without any specialities. A simple class is there, so it is known as a lightweight. So that Spring is known as a lightweight. Okay, now the third terminology of the Spring is, what is Spring is a open source, lightweight, aspect oriented, dependency injection based Java application. Okay, one more thing is, it is loosely coupled. It is loosely coupled. It is a loosely coupled framework. Now, what is the meaning of this loosely coupled? This is the third terminology of the Spring definition. What is the meaning of this loosely coupled? First thing is, what is loosely coupled? Loosely coupled means loosely coupled means if the degree of dependency between two components is less. If the degree of dependency is less between two components, then it is called loosely coupled. It is known as loosely coupled framework. And if the degree of dependency is high between two components, then it is known as tightly coupled framework. Okay, what I want to say, if the degree of dependency is less, then it is known as loosely coupled, and if the degree of dependency is high, then it is known as tightly coupled. Let me take an example of this one. if I want to use okay, let me take a normal running life example like TV and remote. If I would, this is an example of loosely coupled system. This is an loosely coupled system. Loosely coupled means if I want to remove any component, then we can operate another component independently, like without without remote without remote we can operate the TV. Without remote we can operate the TV, so that we can say that it is nothing but an loosely coupled. It is nothing but an loosely coupled. Okay, now spring is a, this is nothing but a definition of loosely coupled and tightly coupled. This is the definition of loosely coupled and tightly coupled. This is the definition of loosely coupled system and tightly coupled. Now spring is a loosely coupled. Spring is a loosely coupled. What is the meaning of this one? How we can say that spring is a loosely coupled framework? Okay, when we will download the spring framework, we will have a lots of jar files. With the spring framework, we get lots of jar files and modules. That jar files are nothing but jar files for modules provided by spring. We will have a lots of jar files or modules we will have with the spring framework, but these jar files are not tightly coupled with one another. These jar files are not tightly coupled with one another, means we can use any jar files, we can use any jar file, or we can say that we can use any module without the use of other module. That means it is a loosely coupled. That means it is a loosely coupled system. What is the meaning of this one? It is a loosely coupled, means all the modules are loosely coupled with each other. All the spring modules are loosely coupled with each other. That means all the modules of spring framework are loosely coupled with each other. Okay guys, I think this one is quite clear. So spring is open source because it comes with the source files. It is lightweight because we do not require any special containers. We do not require, otherwise we are not required any special heavyweight web servers or application servers. We do not require. Okay, and the another thing is it is loosely coupled because it comes with lots of modules. It comes, but any modules, we can use any module without the help of another module, so we can say that it is a loosely coupled. Now this is the most important concept of the spring. This is nothing but an AOP, aspect oriented programming. Aspect oriented programming, the meaning of this is aspect oriented programming. Guys, we are already familiar with the OOPS and POP, procedure oriented programming and object oriented programming. One more approach is there, and that is the aspect oriented programming. What is the meaning of this aspect oriented programming? Programming means the language in which we are using the programs for the communication. Oriented means it is approx dependent. The meaning of oriented is meaning of the oriented is dependent. And what is the meaning of aspect? Aspect means a secondary logic. Aspect means a secondary logic. A secondary logic, or we can say that middleware services, that is known as aspect. Now firstly, before starting the AOP, we have to understand this terminology. What is the meaning of secondary logic? Okay, if there is a secondary logic, then but of this there is a primary logic already exist. So let me study the primary logic and the meaning of secondary logic. What is the meaning of primary logic and secondary logic? Primary logic means the logic which is compulsory to execute your program. The targeted software logic, the targeted output logic, which is compulsory to write down, must to run the program. That is known as primary logic. Secondary logic means optional to execute the program, optional to execute the program, that is known as secondary logic. This is the secondary logic. Let me give the example to understand this approach. Now what is my requirement? I want to just transfer the money, want to transfer the money from one account, transfer the money from one account to another account, from one account to another account. Then my actual logic is, primary logic is deduct the amount, deduct the amount from account A, from first account, and deposit amount into second account, this is my primary logic. But before starting this one, what I have to do? I have to just logging into my bank services. I have to just login in my login in my bank bank website, and then I have to perform this logic I want to perform. But before logging, bank can provide me some security services it can provide. Otherwise, after some time, if I want to ask to the bank from which computer I already logged in, then the computer IP address must be noted down over there. The computer IP address must be noted over there. Okay, means you already log in from this bank, from sorry, you already log in from this IP address. Means what I want to do, note down the IP address from the note down the IP address of the machine from which I already logged in, or note down the time of the transaction, but this concept is not required to transfer the money. So we can say that this is nothing but an secondary logic, or I can say that it is nothing but an middleware services, middleware services it is known as. Okay guys, I think this is clear in your mind what is the meaning of primary logic. Primary logic means without that we cannot execute our program, means it is the targeted output logic it is. And optional, this is secondary, means it is an optional, but it provides the services it provides the services it provides. So this is nothing but an primary logic and the secondary logic. It is nothing but an primary logic and secondary logic. Now what is the meaning of this aspect oriented programming approach? Aspect oriented programming language, sorry, programming approach. Aspect means secondary logic or middleware services. Okay, generally we are doing object oriented program, generally we are using OOPS, means object oriented programming language, to work with the Java. Generally we are working with, otherwise we are using, generally we are using object oriented programming language to work with the Java. But using object oriented programming, we cannot separate primary logic from the secondary logic, primary logic from the secondary logic. We cannot separate the primary logic from the secondary logic. Because of this we have some disadvantages. Because of this we can face some problems we can face. The first one is, if I want to enable or disable the secondary logic, if I want to enable or disable, means right now I do not require those logging services. This is known as actually logging services it is known as. If I do not require these logging services or security services, this means I do not require any secondary logic to be executed on my software. That means I want to disable these secondary services. So I cannot, if I am using the OOPS approach, then what is the meaning of OOPS? We cannot separate the primary logic from the secondary logic. Then what is the problem? We cannot easily enable or disable secondary logic from the primary logic. And the second thing is, if right now in the above example I just use the transaction management, means from the single account I want to just transfer the money into my second account. Now if I required some another services, like I want to just check the balance of my bank account, then once again I required this secondary services I required. Once again I required this secondary services I required. What is my second task? I want to check the balance of my bank account. Then once again I required this secondary services I required. But this secondary services is tightly coupled with this first primary logic. So once again we have to write down the code of this one. Means duplication of the code is there. Duplication of code is there. We cannot easily reuse that secondary logic. We cannot easily reuse that secondary logic, so that my program will be much complex. Program is much complex. If we are using the oops approach, if we are using the oops approach, then the primary logic and secondary logic cannot easily be separatable. Means we cannot easily enable or disable the secondary logic. The duplication of the code is there and program is much complex. Now if we are working with the AOP approach, what is the meaning of AOP? AOP means expect oriented programming. Expect oriented programming. What is the meaning of this one? Using this expect oriented programming, we can we can easily separate the primary logic from secondary logic. So the benefits of this ones are, advantages are, we can easily enable or disable we can easily enable or disable we can easily enable or disable the secondary logic. We can reuse the code. We can reuse the secondary logic whenever we require that one, and my program is not too much complex. So what the actually AOP means, this what AOP will do. So actually AOP having in the Spring we have AOP tool. What AOP tool will do? AOP tool will combine both primary logic with the secondary logic. Primary logic with the secondary logic, and generates the dynamic generate the class generate the in-memory class. Actually that I will discuss about the in-memory class in the further videos, and generate the in-memory class at the runtime. What the AOP tool will do? We have, using the aspect oriented programming approach, what we will do, we will write down the primary logic separate than the secondary logic. Now at the runtime, what AOP tool will do? AOP tool will combine both the logic, primary logic and secondary logic, and generates the in-memory class at the runtime. Generate the in-memory runtime class, and also generate XML file. Also generate the XML file from otherwise using which we can easily enable or disable the secondary logic from the primary logic. Let I will explain this one using the diagram, so you can better understand this thing. What I want to say, AOP tool will combine both the primary logic and the secondary logic, and generates the in-memory class. It generates some proxy classes it will generate. Okay, I will teach this one. So consider this one. This one is my transaction management class. Transaction logic. This is nothing but a transaction logic. Actually it is nothing but a transaction logic. And what is the another logic? Another logic is nothing but an, like, let we go for it, is nothing but an logging logic. Means this is my primary logic. Actually this is my primary logic. This is the primary logic, and this one is nothing but an secondary logic. This is nothing but a secondary logic. Now what the AOP tool will do, what the AOP tool, this is nothing but an AOP tool actually. So what the AOP tool will do, just a moment. What the AOP tool will do, what we have to do at the runtime, we have to just provide the primary logic to the AOP tool, and we have to just provide the secondary logic to the AOP tool. What the AOP tool will do, AOP tool will create a runtime in memory class. It creates, what it will do, it will create a runtime in memory class. It will create the runtime in memory class. It will create the runtime in memory class. It will create. Okay, it will create the runtime in memory proxy classes. It will create, using this class we can use the primary, we can combine the primary logic as well as with the secondary logic. And here it also creates an XML file. It also create the XML file. It creates, using this XML file or end notation, we can enable or disable the secondary logic. We can easily enable or disable the as secondary logic. We can enable or disable. Okay guys, I think using this we can clear the definition of this Spring framework. What is Spring framework? It is the open source, lightweight, loosely coupled, aspect oriented, dependency injection based Java application framework. We already study all the concepts, and this dependency injection I will cover in the dependency injection video, guys. Okay, I think you have a clear about this definition. Okay guys, so if you have a problem, if you have any problem with this one, you can write down in the comment section. Okay, thank you very much. In the next video I will teach something else. Okay, bye bye, good day, have a nice day. Thank you very much.